Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. It walks out of the lounge and into the hallway, closing the door behind it. I walk to the door and I pull it open, revealing the hallway that it had stepped into and nothing else. The ex-mortician steps up next to me and mutter in surprise that the regalian is no longer there, and I let the door swing close and I step away. "You're really going to do nothing?" he asked softly. "I have already explained why I'm not the right choice. I'm not going to repeat myself," I answered calmly. Sitting at my small dining table, I wonder how it knew how to find me. The ex-mortician walked over, and carefully, he watched me as I sat there for a few minutes. "So, did you come over for a reason in particular?" I asked. "Look, you injured yourself to lure those skinwalkers away. I just wanted to make sure you were okay," he answered. "I'll be fine. I was just going to archive some more cases. Hopefully have a little less action in my life for a while," I say as I grab my laptop, my coffee, and a few other implements. "What case files are you going to be looking at this time?" the ex-mortician called out. "Mimics, or suspected mimics." "Ooh, those can be messy." Case file: Mimic confirmed, elevator, Tokyo, Japan. In the month of November, a confirmed mimic was located in an apartment building in Tokyo, Japan. The case that brought this to the attention of the network was the 11th confirmed missing person involving a tenant at this building. A young male, aged 24 years old, was seen entering the elevator, and he was not seen since. An investigating officer noted the other missing people and spoke his intentions to a private investigator known to investigate the unusual. This PI is a known network operative. He was able to get the suspected elevator shut down for a period of 3 days under the guise of maintenance. The first day was spent on research and tracking down the footage involving the other victims, and he was able to locate the corresponding shaft. On the second day, he confirmed the presence of a mimic copying an elevator car. Since the mimic had recently fed, it wasn't active in its consumption. However, as the personal investigator suspected a mimic's involvement, he was able to quickly confirm it. And that night, he used an accelerant infused with metallic shards and a lighter to remove the mimic seed. He then entered the shaft and killed the mimic nest, which was located at the top of the elevator shaft, and the damage caused to the actual elevator engine at the top was approximately 20 million yen. The corpses were never recovered. Case file: Mimic confirmed, escalator, Colorado, USA. At an abandoned shopping mall located in the state of Colorado, urban explorers were searching through the complex. One had split off from the group and was walking along the escalator. The attached video footage located on the Mortician's network showed what happened. The young explorer was walking around until they reached about 1/3 of the way along. Suddenly, they ceased walking, though it was evident that they were trying to move. As they looked around, they started to resume a forward motion, as if the escalator was working again. When they noticed the unusual activity, they looked ahead at what appeared to be a mouth that looked like the combination of a sarlacc from the Star Wars setting and a Venus flytrap. The explorers started yelling loudly, but none of the others seemed to notice, and the explorer was consumed slowly. While the death was a tragedy, there were two things of note regarding this case. The complex had no active utilities at all, so how the security camera was working is relatively unknown. Also, 5 hours after the explorer vanished, the mall was burned to the ground, and the fire service was unable to locate anything relating to arson or anything that could cause the mall to be burned to ash. So this part of the case file is still active. Case file: Mimic suspected, elevator, China. This information was smuggled out of mainland China by an operative who passed away shortly after delivery. 300 video clips were on the thumb drive, all of them almost identical in footage. A different person was seen in each video file, but they were all the only one on a seemingly malfunctioning elevator, and they all got stuck and through machinations that are unknown. All of their heads were removed violently. Accompanying text files indicate that there was never any blood or bodies found in any of the kill sites, and given the strict information control that the Chinese government has over the people, there is no way that we can communicate with our network resources over there, as they are still hunting for the network in the deep web. There is a smaller text file which indicates that mimics might be evolving to more mobile forms. Abandoned cars on the side of the road seems to be a common suspicion of mimics. Also, theories or suspicions that they are working with other cryptids. After disconnecting my laptop from the deep web, I stand up and stretch. There was a lot of information to go through, and sitting hunched over my computer took a toll. As I finished my stretch, I noticed something concerning. Shadows seems to be darker. Light in general seems to be slowly fading away. So grabbing my pistol, I carefully make my way until I discover the problem. The ex-mortician sits next to a cryptid that I never expected to see. Sitting there like a gangly lupin, the rake sits there. Its pale skin almost seems to glow. Its empty eyes stare at me, and I hear a scratchy voice speak in my mind. Threat. I aim my weapon at the cryptid when the ex-mortician shakes his head. He is my friend. He is the rake. He struggles to speak, like his words are escaping quicksand. What brings you here? I ask. Help, it replies verbally. This will be my final case, archival or otherwise. The investigation I have conducted when I arrived to the forest has led me to the foregone conclusion that I will never be able to return to my home or the mortician's network, except as another case file. I would like to thank everyone who has enjoyed my work, and I hope that someone else is able to find that network, as there is still so much more to archive, and I appreciate the interest in my work. As I mentioned earlier, the ex-mortician had become a vassal of the rake that has appeared in my apartment. I grabbed my survival gear as the rake has asked for help, a sentence I never thought that I would have to write. The rake disappeared, but I was still aware of its presence, like a spike thrust into my skull. The ex-mortician and I drove to a national forest, following the blur that was the rake as it herded my driving to where it wanted. Retrieving my gear I collected, I start my slow hike through the woods, the rake my guide. It didn't like me being slow, but given that I was still recovering from my gunshot there, speed was not a factor that I could contribute to for long stretches of time. The ex-mortician was silent throughout this entire enterprise, which wasn't a shock to me. For miles, we trekked through the woods, which had an odd sense to them. It was like being wrapped in a blanket of warmth and stinging nettles. Pleasant, but painful. As we got closer to where the rake was leading us, I stopped. I remember being briefly stationed in a US base secreted within the Russian wilderness. It was only for a few weeks, but I could barely remember it, and now I know why. The US base was small, barely bigger than the base that was overrun, possibly by doppelgangers. Small number of personnel meant fewer resources and lower amounts of equipment, which further equates to less chance of being spotted. But what the Pentagon failed to take into consideration was the presence of other beings of this planet, whose existence is either redacted, blatantly disregarded, or met with dismissive hostility. As documented in my earlier case files, we are not alone on this planet, from known cryptids to whatever did that to the town centuries ago. But most folklore is restricted to particular regions of the world, or so we have been led to believe. One of the more infamous cryptids or monsters of folklore in Russia is Baba Yaga, the Russian version of Witch in the Woods. Whether she will help or hinder are based on factors that I will never figure out. But looking at what I was seeing in front of me in a national forest in the USA, I remembered my encounter with Baba Yaga in Russia, including its walking house on bird legs. I was on routine patrol within 12 hours of my arrival at the Russian forward scouting base. Patrols were random and executed by one person. I was patrolling at 04:19 when it arrived. I felt a shift in the forest, but at that time was not aware of the Baba Yaga who ruled the forest we were in. I was 12 minutes into my patrol when I walked out of a mist that appeared out of nowhere. The only other thing of note at that time was I had a resounding headache, but I persevered. This house descended towards me slowly, and I became aware of the attention that I was being burdened with. The legs crouched down, and the door opened when it got low enough, and a woman stood there, her features seeming to shift like a mirage. The features went from attractive to repulsive, but they never seemed to settle. All it seemed to do was compound my headache. Baba Yaga greeted me and bade me to enter her hut. While my commanding officer likely would have disagreed with me, I hoped the change of scenery would diminish my pounding head. I agreed that I would, but I wasn't able to step up to the hut as it was still a good 15 feet in the air. "Take the stairs," was the response as a staircase appeared before me. Carefully, I strode up and entered this hut. Once crossing the threshold, my headache was gone, and I thanked the woman for her hospitality. She thanked me for the courtesy, saying that I was a nice young man. Then the side of me that I had under control since a child had to rise up. It was something that I had made myself aware of, so I could maintain control. But here it was, like a cobra, poised to strike. The woman didn't seem to pay any mind as I fought for my control of my own body. That part that I had kept controlled wanted to shoot the woman, but I was able to keep control. And as soon as I ejected the magazine and thrust my weapon away, she turned to me and smiled. I was suddenly very aware of the predicament that I had blundered into. She seemed to notice and noted that I was a smart boy. Then her eyes seemed to soften. "But a broken boy too," she said softly. She stepped towards me then hissed, "Empty boy, void stricken." Next thing, I was consciously aware that I was being shipped off home. But the one thing I did overhear before I left was there was another set of incomplete stairs in the woods. And now, I see another set of incomplete stairs in this forest, and what is worse is I see a chicken-legged hut, dead. As I approach the legs, I can see that they are wooden, and somehow blood was oozing from the wounds inflicted upon them. Walking the 30 feet to get to the capsized hut, I can see military uniforms, but the creatures in them are not human. Dogmen, German shepherds and a couple of bloodhounds by the looks, and they were dead. There was a mass of grey flesh next to which stood the rake. It looked at me, and I felt a crushing sadness within me. Too late. Mistress dead. It sounded within my head. It walked up to the ex-mortician and with a casual swipe of its claws, sliced his stomach wide open. He slumped to the ground and just lay there as the rake ate him. The dogmen were wearing military dog tags, but I didn't recognize the names. I was unsure of what to do or if the rake would eat me next. Suddenly, a loud crashing noise ripped through the air, and the hut had flipped upside down and was sinking into the ground, as was the mass that must have been the Baba Yaga. The staircase shuddered for a moment before collapsing and rebuilding itself upside down. I remember listening to the encounters people have had with the stairs in the forest, or how they feel creeped out by them, or the superstition surrounding them. Then I knew. Baba Yaga was here and brought her sisters with her. They lived within the hundreds of miles of forest. Some of those cryptid encounters were likely victims of Baba Yaga who had insulted them. So, the Baba Yaga sought retribution. They would curse those humans and force them to live how they were changed. Then, I turned to the rake. That is how you came to be, isn't it? You each belong to the Baba Yaga, like a faithful companion, I say, as I turned to the rake as it finished consuming. It nodded once and stared at me. A thudding noise boomed in the distance, and it is starting to come closer. Another Baba Yaga is coming to see her fallen sister. I doubt the rake will let me leave. So like I said, this is my final archive. I appreciated the enormity of the task that once laid before me, but I do not think that I will be able to return to it. So as what is likely my final request, if you can, please find the Mortician's network and continue what was once my task.
Automated message.
Hello, Harold. If you are reading this, I am either dead or have been missing for over 7 months. As you had backdoor access into the program that I use for browsing the deep web, I figure that you have read into my case files. I am sorry that I was unable to inform you of this, but I think you will understand why I decided not to inform you. But since this is likely my last report, this will be more observation than fact, but the spiderweb of deceit in regards to cryptids and related fatalities is surprising from what I have been able to ascertain. Something I have noticed is 4chan, regarded in a non-positive light. I find it unusual that some of the monsters were created on that site. Making a monster is how it was referred to, and given the photos they apparently photoshopped and otherwise manipulated, those images are not as doctored as we have been led to believe. The creatures are actually there, but because they doctor over the photo subject, it indicates that the creature is a creation. The reason why I find this odd is the fact that 4chan has been cited as a resource for mainstream for larger news stories. However, as previously referenced, 4chan is not that reputable, but the elevation the website has gained when used as a reference point, it struck me as odd, unless it is part of a misdirection campaign, which is what I theorize. Missing 411 is intriguing as there is some correlation between bodies examined and cases referenced, but there doesn't seem to be anyone trying to shut it down, though that is more likely due to internet discourse. But the few attempts to besmirch the person who is following these cases have not been very successful. I am well aware of how this sounds, like a conspiracy dreamed up by people with low IQs and a hidden puppet complex. But there is one other piece of this puzzle: fear. It is easier to mischaracterize these as animal attacks, or they just wandered off, any excuse to hand-wave the unusual or downright bizarre. Local papers won't admit that search and rescue officers have no clue despite following the evidence because the outcome doesn't work. They follow the tracks, the logical progressions and logic, but no clues or conclusions are encountered. As you can reasonably conclude, there are a fair amount of missing 411 bodies that have been autopsied and cataloged, and as my final archival entry, I will include two below, one with cryptid involvement and the other just unexplainable. 411 corpse, confirmed cryptid involvement. In 1938, the individual involved disappeared from a family excursion through a location that is not to be disclosed given the nature of the cryptid involved. After the requisite searches, the individual was deemed lost, though the family never gave up hope. What is not known to the family is that a dryad abducted the individual. The boy would never be found alive. In 1996, a hiker with ties to the Morticians stumbles upon the body of a missing individual. Dryads capture young children, though typically they have another cryptid to do the abducting for them. That does not seem to be the case in this situation, though. The individual did not age a single day, even after death. The capabilities of dryads are not very well known, as encounters with them are exceedingly rare. However, there is a record of an autopsy conducted on a dryad. Cryptid autopsy. Dryad. Age unknown. Name unknown. The specimen is measured at 5 feet and 6 inches in height. Her complexion appears tan, but closer inspection indicates that the skin is actually very fine bark, which is sturdier than normal tree bark. Incisions with regular equipment is virtually impossible, and typical cryptid countermeasures fail to inflict any impact. Woodworking equipment was brought in, and a rudimentary autopsy was given, but the equipment required frequent repairs due to overheating of the engines or blunting of the blades involved. And while the specimen is humanoid, the weight is significantly higher than the originally suspected. 438 pounds of mass compressed into an athletic build. No digestive organs could be discerned, but analysis of the hair fibers indicates some form of moss which gives way to a photosynthesis style of nourishment. Musculature almost seems human, except appears to be constructed of wood. It is nearly impossible to gauge physical capabilities, as at the time of death, the wood appears to have hardened. No skeletal system is traditionally seen, though some form of human exoskeleton can be deduced from thin but extremely durable branches throughout the sample's body. With no digestive tract, it is impossible to deduce if these cryptids require other form of nutrition or if they eat for any other reason. The discovery of this sample was borderline miraculous. A solo hiker happened to overhear a Gaelic phrase being recited where the body was discovered. Intrigued at recognizing that language, but confused as to the intent, the hiker approached and saw the sample resting on what is hypothesized to be a stone cairn. The hiker tried to administer first aid, but found the skin and musculature too rigid to budge. The weight was far more than what the hiker was prepared to contend with, so they made a call via satellite phone. Anomalous phrases triggered the mortician protocol, and an asset was dispatched from the local area to assist the hiker. During the statement given, the Scottish tourist explained that they heard a Gaelic phrase being repeated in a slow tone. Wood for life, youth from the young. It struck the hiker as some odd druid phrase, but wasn't able to conclude to any solid connection. The asset reported that he felt observed while he moved the body himself to a mortician transport after the hiker gave his statement. 411 body. Suspected cryptid involvement. Anomalous behavior confirmed. This one is odd for a fair amount of reasons. While the identity wasn't initially confirmed, the body was able to provide answers that could be verified through other means. The body was seen prone in a clearing during another SNR operation. The person who located the body reported it to his quadrant supervisor. The regular mortician who conducted the autopsy of the body, who was not the intended target, noted a complete lack of human organs, along with no apparent cause of death. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary except for the lack of brains, heart, liver, and lungs. No signs of deterioration and no indications of forced removal. The organs were simply not there. It wasn't until the coroner mused aloud to the identity of the corpse that it sat up, suspecting this may have been another involuntary reaction. The doctor seemed to sense something odd about the situation. It just didn't feel right. The coroner asked one question to the corpse before contacting the network. "Do you know how you died?" The corpse nodded in response. Once the coroners took over the case with an appropriate dummy corpse, the coroner determined that it could only answer close questions. Over several hours, the following information was obtained. This person went missing in 1791. He was with friends and family. He was not from the woods where his body was found. He was called away by something. He knows he has a name, but he does not know what it is anymore. He was Native American. He knew that his friends and family were looking for him, but he was unable to reach out to them. He does not know why that was. He doesn't remember eating after his disappearance, and he has not been able to contact any other human being until his body was allowed to be recovered. He knows that something made him into what he currently is, but he is not able to identify it. After the long interview, this body was walked slowly to the 411 wing and placed with the 43 other bodies to stand there until further questioning. I am so sorry that I was no longer able to provide further additions to my archival work, So this is my way of passing the baton. Whether you decide to pick it up, Harold, it is entirely up to you. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.